Hello everyone and welcome to this, a first look at Unity 2D animation. My name is Kasanis. Guys, right now we're in the middle of a pandemic. I'm in a house full of people and I'm gonna try and be as loud as I possibly can. But I'm recording, there's kids around, there's parents around, everyone's around right now, and it's gonna be difficult for me to be too loud. Okay everybody, so I'll do my best. Alright. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at animation in 2D. We're going to talk about animating the character that we created in the Unity 2D rigging series. And after that, we'll talk about the idea of an idle animation. Okay? Let's get started. Okay, guys, let's see where we stand right now. I've got myself a character, and it doesn't really matter if you have the same character as me. As long as your character has been rigged in Unity 2D, you'll be able to follow along with what we're doing here. So if I take a look at my character, I've got myself my male zombie. I can see that I've created all of the bone structure and it's been brought in appropriately. I can see it right here in my scene view. I've got all of my rig structure that I built in the previous episodes. If I take a look underneath my male zombie, I've got myself all of the sprites. I've got myself my IK solvers and the legs, and all of my bones, all of my rigging structure is available under BX root, which is exactly where we put it. So that's super awesome. If I take a look, I've got my BN pelvis and I've got my BN spine. The BN spine is the upper body, the BN pelvis is the lower body, and everything is set up and ready to be animated. Now there are a couple of things that I'm going to need before I start animation. First of all, I want to make sure that inside of my assets folder, I've got myself an animation folder. I'll double click, you can see that right now it's empty. My animation folder is going to be used to store all of the animation components that I'm going to be using to animate this particular character. In fact, if I really wanted to stay well organized, I might break this up into animation zombie, animation character, etc. Just to make sure that I stay organized within my structure here. I want to make sure that if I'm creating a very large game that I stay organized right away, right? I might be passing these files around to other people. We might be collaborating with Unity's collab. Who knows? And we want to make sure that we stay organized so everyone knows exactly where everything is. So I've got that set up. What we do require, however, is somewhere within our male zombie, within your character, we're going to require a couple of components to allow us to animate. Just like anything else in Unity, this is exactly the same as animating anything else in Unity. There's nothing different about it in all honesty. We're going to require an animator, we're going to require an animator controller, and we're going to require several animation clips. Once we've got those things, we will be all set, we'll be animated. Okay, so it's exactly the same as anything else that you create right here as far as animation is concerned right here within Unity. Okay, there are a couple of different ways that we can create these different components. One way of adding in our animation components is to go to the Add Component button with the top layer of my zombie selected. I can go to the Add Component button, and I can go through and add my animator. And then in turn, I could add my animation controller. And after I have my animation controller, I could go ahead and create myself a couple of animation clips that I'd use to animate my particular zombie. The animator itself is used as a holder. Well, let me just add it here so you can see it. I'm going to add component. I'm going to search for animator. So I've typed in anim here, and I'm going to click animator. It's automatically going to add the animator component, which is awesome. Now, what this is really doing for us is giving us the opportunity to add in an animation controller. The animation controller is basically the control system for a state machine. It's going to control the logic as we move through the different animation clips that we create. Our animation controller will be displayed inside of our animator panel. So right now I have nothing set up. I don't actually have an animator controller set up yet. If you don't have your animator panel, you can go to Window, you can find Animation, and launch your animator window. And while you're here, you might as well launch your animation panel as well, because we're going to be using that in a little bit. So with my animator controller open, I can see that I don't currently have an animation controller. This animator window is going to allow me to create a state machine. That state machine is going to have logic that allows me to move through the different states. Those different states are going to be my animation clips. Okay, that might sound a little bit confusing, but we'll get to that in 1 second. So I could go through and I could add everything I wanted to manually. All right, but I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go over here for a minute, and I'm simply going to remove the component. I've removed my animator. Now, I want to go through and add all of those things. If I don't want to do it manually, there's a one-stop shop that I can go ahead and hit. With my animation panel in place, so with my animation panel right here, I've got myself the Create button. Now, I'm already doing this inside of my project, inside of my animation folder. I want to stay organized, and that's exactly where I want everything to go. So, I've got myself my animation window open, my animation panel open, and I've got myself this Create button right here. In hitting the create button, it's going to say, hey, do you want to create some stuff? And yeah, I do. That's why I pushed the button in the first place. So the stuff I want to create is everything: my animator controller, my animator, as well as at least one animation clip. In this particular case, it's saying, okay, where do you want to save your animation clip? And luckily, I'm already in my animation folder, so it's going to go right there. If not, just go to the location you want to save your stuff. Remember, guys, stay nice and neat and clean. Okay, I'm going to call this test for now. I don't want to actually make our idle at this point in time. I'm just going to call this test. And as soon as I do, you can see that I've created inside of my inspector, I've got myself an animator controller. And here it's called male zombie. If I head back to my project, you can see that in my animation panel, my animation folder, I've got myself my animation controller, as well as the animation clip that I set up, my test clip. Super, super awesome. I'm all ready to go here. So what does that mean? Well, I'm going to go to my animation panel, and I'm going to head back to my scene panel as well so I can see my character. So just like anything else within Unity, if I want to animate this character, I can go ahead and move things manually, or I can go ahead and adjust things through the inspector. The easiest way to animate this particular zombie is to go through and move things manually. I want to animate this entire structure. Well, this entire structure anyway. I want to be animating my bones, so the entire structure of my bones. If I want to do so, all I need to do is go ahead and hit this little red button, which will automatically start the recording session. Boop! There we go. We've got ourselves recording. Everything's turned red. That tells me that I'm currently in record mode, and everything I do is going to be recorded into an animation of some kind. Actually, into our test animation. Not some kind of animation, particularly into our test animation. Now, just like anything else, we need to go through now and physically move the character the way we want to. A couple things we should check out. We didn't take a look at this yet, so I've got myself my root selected, and I'm going to go into the translation. We talked about the idea of IK in a previous episode and what IK would do for me. Watch what happens. If I actually grab onto the spine of my character and I move the spine around, you can see, well, first of all, you can see that I've generated myself a brand new keyframe, which is awesome. But what else you'll notice is that the entire upper body is moving along with the character. And we talked about this before. We talked about the idea of FK versus IK animation. My entire upper body is FK, forward kinematics. So everything is moving along with the root right now, with this spine. That's our parent. Our parent moves, and every other child above it moves as well. If we take a look, however, if I head back over to my BX root and I move my BX root around, you'll notice that my upper body spine is moving, but my lower legs are not. The feet themselves are staying planted. That is the entire point of IK. We want to maintain this position at all times. So my IK is on fully right now, and that's going to allow my character to remain, my character's feet to remain in place, right? The IK targets right here are in this location, and my IK effectors are doing their best to stay in this location. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Therefore, I can adjust my zombie's weight up and down with not actually having to counter animate the feet the entire time. So that's awesome. Now you'll see everything I've done is being recorded right here. Not the up and down, I'm stayed in the same place, but every time I stop, that final position is being recorded here as a keyframe. This is going to allow me to collect all of the information about our particular zombie. So, let's say I was moving the head, and I was moving the arms, and it's not super fun to watch me animate, is it? Let's say I'm decided to move all this kind of stuff, and there we go, I'm getting my zombie into some kind of zombie-like pose. There we go, I love my zombie pose, let's say. I'm all done, and I've got myself an awesome set of keyframes here. Well, I've got a couple of options. If I'm going to create myself a loop, well, I want to copy these keyframes over. I can select the top keyframe. I can then Control-C to copy and scrub across to the location where I want to copy these keyframes to. So now I can Control-V, and there we go. We've got ourselves our first and our last keyframes identical in nature. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to make sure that they're the same. If they're not the same, we do not have a loop. Okay, so we're creating ourselves a loop. Just like anything else, we've gone through, we've manipulated everything. If I actually want to create some kind of animation, let me click somewhere in the middle here. I'll grab my BX root, I'll move it up. There we go, I'm getting my keyframes. Anything that I move now is also going to be animated And I'm creating keyframes here as I create, I don't know what I'm doing right now. I'm just moving things around temporarily. Okay, that's how I like things. I am done. I've got myself an animation here. This is not really an idle, guys. This is just an example animation. We'll talk about the idle in a little bit. Once I'm done the animation itself, I can turn off my record session. There we go, and I've recorded all of the animation. That's awesome. I can see things are blue, which means these things have been animated in some way. I can see all of my keyframes here. And interestingly enough, if I head back over to my animator, I can now see I've got myself our test animation, and it is orange inside of the animator. What does that mean? Well, the test animation was our very first state. And it's orange because that is our default state. We're automatically going to enter into this default state whenever I hit play. When I hit play right now, bam, you will notice that my zombie is now animated. Woo, that animation is awesome. Look at that. All right, we've got ourselves an animated zombie. Now, as we create more and more states, we're going to have to come up with some logic in order to control these particular states. That is going to be for another episode. What I'd like to talk about, though, right now is the idea of creating ourselves an appropriate idle. What I created there is obviously not an appropriate idle. So let's just go through the ideas of what an idle might be. So first of all, your idle is a loop. So we want to make sure that we've got a nice, clean loop in our idle. Like any other loop you're creating, you're going to want to make sure that the first and the last frames are identical. If they're not identical in every single way, you're going to have a pop within your animation. And the idle is something that's going to be playing all the time. The player is going to notice a pop in your idle animation. You want to make sure that your idle animation is really, really clean. So that's the first thing, a nice loop. The second thing you'll want to consider is that the idle animation is probably going to be your default animation. And whether we're talking about your character, your player character, or we're talking about an NPC of some kind, a mob of some kind, it's still going to be the default state that that character is probably in. We're going to want to make sure that the idle is not too big. We don't want these really large movements so that the idle becomes noticeable. Remember, we're trying to make this look like we're trying to have our players look at the game and not look at the production of the game. We don't want them to notice things like our idles or our loops in any way. We don't want them to become aware of the fact they're looking at a loop. As soon as they become aware of the fact they're looking at a loop, then they're no longer looking at your game, they're no longer playing your game, and instead they're concentrating on the production of your game. And that's going to wreck immersion. We don't want that. We want to make sure that our loops are clean and that they're not too large so they become noticeable as loops. So your idle has got to be something that's small enough that keeps your character alive. And that's really what we're trying to do, is keep these characters alive whenever we're not being controlled in some way. So what does that mean? Does that mean that all of our loops have these little tiny breathing things? Well, no. What I like to do when I create my loops is create a main loop of some kind, a main idle of some kind. And that main idle might have special idles to make it a little bit more interesting. And those special idles can be larger actions. So maybe a stretch, or maybe they're checking their weapon, or maybe they're, I don't know, rolling their shoulders. Anything that you might want to do that's a special action. I'll create one idle loop. That idle loop is something that will play all the time. And then every once in a while, randomly, I will branch off within my code, I'll branch off within my state machine, and I will play some kind of idle special. And that idle special will add some interest into the idle itself. Whenever your player walks away from their game for a minute, they stop moving, well, maybe everything in the entire game goes into their idle state. And that means they're on their phone, let's say, and they're watching this screen from a little ways away, and they're going to see that idle for a really long time. Setting up a couple of idle specials is going to allow you to make some interesting randomized actions within the character, and it's going to allow for some interest. So every time there's this little bit of interest and this little spectacle that occurs, again, we're talking about immersion here. We're talking about the flow states. Having this little bit of spectacle, whenever we've got these new little things that the player's noticing, it's going to add to their immersive state. So that's something you want to consider as well. Now, I could go through for you right now and animate this character, and I would do it in exactly the same way that you just saw. I'd add myself a brand new, so I down here where it says, do you want to add something new? I'm clicking on the test, the drop-down menu, and I could hit create new. And in doing so, I could create myself a brand new idle animation, or a brand new special idle, or anything else that I want to create. I could go ahead and do that right now. I'm not going to make you watch me make this idle for this character. That would be so boring. Watching me sit here and manipulate. Animation takes a long time to make it look good. So I'm not going to go through and make you watch me make this idle. Instead, what I'll do is I'll create an idle animation and an idle special. And once I've done so, I will show you both of those animations. Okay, everyone? I'll be back in a minute.
A few moments later.
Okay, everyone, I have finished up with this particular animation. In fact, I did two different animations. I did a zombie idol as well as a zombie idol special, just like I described previously. The special animation is going to allow to have some randomization within the idol itself. It's going to break up our initial loop. In this particular case, both of these, Zombie Idol and Zombie Idol Special, are simple loops that I'm switching back and forth between. And I've written a really simple script that basically checks to see if after 8 seconds I should switch into, 50% chance of switching into the other pose or the other animation. Okay, let me hit play here so that you can see it. Let's hit play. And there we go. That is my zombie animation idle. It's really, really simple. There's not a whole lot going on. And after a certain amount of time, it's going to check. And there we go. We switched into the idle special. And again, it's not super amazing either. I did it very quickly just to kind of get this video going. But that's what's going to happen. And basically, it's going to break it up. And because it's a 50% chance that it's going to switch into the other pose, the other set of animation, there's going to be a randomized set of zombies out there that are all kind of moving differently. So we'll let it switch one more time, just so you can see how it slowly, there we go, it slowly switches into the other animation. And the reason why I was able to do that is because I'm not utilizing sprite sheet animation. I don't have to worry about creating a whole bunch of different animation in order to have them blend together. Instead, this character can blend between the different animations utilizing the transitions. So let's take a look at what I mean by that. I'm going to hit stop. And I'll go over into our animator. And inside of our animator, we can see that we've got ourselves two different states. The Zombie Idol Special, let's zoom in here. The Zombie Idol Special as well as the Zombie Idol. And each of these states has a transition going between them. So they will switch if, let's take a look at the list, if our idle switch, our parameter idle switch is a trigger. If idle switch occurs, it's going to switch to this one here. And if idle switch occurs, it's going to switch back again. And again, I'm just setting this through code. I'll make sure that the switch occurs in code. Okay, and that's it. If we take a look right here at the top with this particular transition, I have a blend time between these two animations. I can shorten this, and I'd have a very quick, instantaneous, if I made it short enough, kind of switch over into the next animation. Or I could drag this out really far and allow it to switch slowly into the other animation. Same thing is true of this transition. I've got myself a blend time here that's blending between those two animations. And that's kind of why the animation slowly moves into the other one. Okay, so I really like that. Now, if we take a look at the animation itself, my zombie idol, really simplistic. All I did is exactly what I told you I was going to do. I created myself an initial pose. I copied that pose onto the 5-second mark. I want to have this loop, so these poses are exactly the same. And then I added some animation in between. You can see there's only a handful of keyframes, or a handful of poses, key poses, within this particular animation. In fact, the largest amount is right here, and this is the eye blink. So there's not a whole lot of animation that I did here. I just set this up quickly so we could actually see it operating. All right, I offset some of those poses so that we had some wave principle occurring within the animation itself. And that's it. The Zombie Idol Special is exactly the same. Only a handful of poses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 key poses, and then the blink, which is right here. That's kind of the most animation. Super, super simple. Once I set this up, I made sure to go in to my curves. So I'm looking at the dope sheet there. The dope sheet itself is where I'm showing all the different keyframes. The curves themselves allows me to adjust the curves and adjust how my animation is working. And I went through and I smoothed this animation out. I don't have any sudden changes. I don't have any broken tangents or anything like that within here. It's just simply smooth animation. The zombie itself is going to move kind of like the old-fashioned zombies, the slow-moving zombies, so I made sure that my animation was nice and smooth. And again, guys, your curves is a mathematical representation of your animation. The smoother your curves, the smoother your animation is going to be. Sudden transitions within the animation itself, so if I've broken tangents and I've kind of made a V or something like that, I've broken these tangents in half and had both of the tangents pointing in upwards, it's going to create a V, a very sharp V, and that's going to be an instantaneous change. And I don't want that for a zombie. If I was making a bouncing ball or something like that, that would be perfect. But in this particular case, I don't want that for the zombie. Now, I keep saying zombie. You might not have a zombie. Remember, guys, in this idle, you want to create something that is going to be for your character. This is really a character move. There's no such thing as a standard idle. You want to keep your character alive. You want to make sure they're alive when they're not moving at all. But there's no such thing as a standard idle. You want to create something that is for your particular character. In this case, I chose slow-moving actions for my zombie. All right, guys, let me hit play here. So we're kind of watching this on the way out. There we go. We switched right away this time. Anyway, guys, that takes us to the end of this video, and I hope that was helpful to you. If it wasn't, let me know. These videos are for you, and I'm really interested in hearing what you think of them. I'm really interested in hearing about what you're doing as well. So down in the comments, let me know your ideas. Let me know what you're working on. All right, guys, if you liked it, let me know with a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. All right? I hope you guys are staying safe within this pandemic. I hope you guys are, staying isolated, watching some videos, and having a good time. All right, everyone? Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below, and if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone.